Hi everyone, tonight we're going to take a drive together, but not just any drive. Imagine a narrow mountain road, slick with rain, coiling like a snake through the mist. The windshield wipers are working overtime, slashing back and forth, but they can't quite clear the glass. Headlights cut through the darkness in brief, shaky tunnels of light, and every shadow on the roadside looks like something waiting, watching. It's the kind of night when your radio fizzles out, your phone loses signal, and your brain decides to remember every horror story it ever heard. And trust me, this one, you won't survive if you're the nervous type. So, before we get comfortable tonight, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, comment down below with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That way, when we're all shivering together, we'll know who else is awake in the dark with us. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soft background noise, and let's get started tonight. The mountain road had its own kind of reputation. On dry days, it was already dangerous blind turns, steep cliffs, no guardrails. But when it rained, that's when the stories began. Locals warned outsiders, don't drive the mountain road in the rain. Of course, that just made people curious, and curiosity, as usual, never ends well. They said there was always someone waiting by the roadside when the storm came. Not a stranger in jeans and a jacket. Not a lost hiker with a flashlight. No, this was a woman, always in a red dress. No umbrella, no coat, no bag. Just drenched fabric clinging to her frame, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes impossible to read in the dark. And the strangest thing, she never moved. No matter how fierce the downpour, no matter how fast the wind tore across the mountain, she stood there, upright, patient, watching. Some drivers claimed she raised her hand, as if asking for a ride. Others swore she only stared, expressionless, her dress clinging like fresh blood to her skin. Of course, not everyone believed it. That's the thing about ghost stories, half the fun is dismissing them, until the road has you trapped in the middle of the storm, and the wipers can't clear the water fast enough, and suddenly you see her. The first time I heard about her, it was from a truck driver who never went back up that mountain after dark. He said he saw her standing just past mile marker 13. Funny number, right? He slowed down, thinking she was hurt. But as he drew closer, she lifted her face, and her eyes caught his headlights like a predator's. That was enough. He swerved and kept going, tires skidding dangerously close to the cliff edge. When he looked back in his mirror, nothing. Just wet pavement, empty road. Not even a single footprint in the mud. Here's the part he never told his boss. When he pulled into the depot later, someone had left a soaked handprint on the inside of his windshield. Not outside, inside, and his cab had been locked the whole time. Standard creepy event. Check. Weird detail. Also check. Here's the weird one. That same night, he swore he heard music. Faint, muffled, like a wedding procession echoing from far away. Except the radio was dead. Except he was the only one on that mountain. Except there hasn't been a wedding there for decades. Can you guys get out of this mountain alive? I wouldn't bet on it. But maybe the strangest thing about the red dress woman is how often she's seen. It isn't a once-in-a-generation ghost. No, she shows up again and again. Different drivers, different years, but always the same figure in the rain. Some even said she looked directly at them, her expression shifting for just a moment: anger, sorrow, even laughter, like she was choosing which story to tell that night. One impossible story that made the rounds. A motorcyclist swore he rode straight through her, not past, not around, through. His bike cut her in half, like she was made of mist, but his body went cold, drenched, soaked to the bone. When he stopped at a gas station 20 minutes later, his clothes were dripping as if he'd just stepped out of a lake, and it wasn't even raining in town. Another impossible one. A taxi driver claimed he picked her up, gave her a ride halfway down the mountain. He said she sat silently in the back, the smell of wet earth filling the car. When he reached a flat stretch and looked back to tell her they were safe, the seat was empty, but a bouquet of white flowers lay where she had been, flowers that crumbled to ash when the police tried to examine them. And the last one, because 3's the magic number, was from a couple driving late at night. They never saw her, but their dashcam did. When they reviewed the footage later, the camera caught a woman in red walking beside their car, keeping pace at highway speed, her face turned toward the lens the entire time. Yeah, try sleeping after that. The mountain road always seemed to swallow these tales whole. No police reports, no official notes, just stories passed around at diners, late-night radio shows, and campfires. The locals knew better than to argue. They'd shrugged, stirred their tea, and say, "Well, you'll see her when the rain comes." And that's how it all begins. With the storm, with the road, and with the woman in the red dress waiting, just around the next bend. The first encounter, the rain came down in sheets, hammering the windshield like fists, and the mountain road turned slick and alive beneath the tires. For anyone else, it might have been just another bad night of driving, but for Daniel, it was the beginning of something he could never explain away. He was used to this road. He'd taken it dozens of times before, even in storms. He knew its turns, its curves, its sudden drops. But that night, the storm seemed different. It felt heavier, almost personal, like the rain itself wanted him to slow down and look around. The wipers groaned, sliding back and forth, barely keeping up. And that was when Daniel saw her dot. At first it was just a smear of red against the grey curtain of rain. He thought maybe it was a trick of the headlights, some piece of debris caught in the storm. But the closer he got, the more distinct it became. The figure of a woman, standing upright at the edge of the road, her dress clinging like a second skin. No umbrella, no coat, chest, drenched fabric and pale arms, limp at her sides. Daniel's stomach clenched. Every story he'd brushed off as nonsense came rushing back in that one instant. His foot hovered over the brake, but instinct screamed, "Don't stop, don't even slow down." Still, his car began to decelerate, as if some invisible hand pressed against it. Her face turned toward him. Even through the rain, even through the haze of headlights, he could see the unnatural stillness in her features. No blinking, no squinting against the downpour. Her hair hung slick and heavy, plastered to her face. But her eyes, dark hollows in the storm, never left him. He jerked the wheel slightly, swerving just enough to avoid her. Tires skidded, heart hammered, and for a second he thought he was going over the edge. But the car righted itself, and in the mirror, nothing. The road was empty, and yet his passenger seat was wet. Standard creepy moment. That's the one. But here's the weird detail Daniel could never shake. A smell lingered in the car. Not the musky dampness of rain-soaked clothes. No, it was sharper, almost metallic, like iron, like blood, and it clung to the upholstery long after the storm passed. That was his first encounter. But it wasn't the last. Of course. Daniel wasn't the only one who had that kind of night. A farmer taking supplies down the same road swore he'd seen the red-dressed woman too. Except in his version, she didn't just stand still. She raised her hand, as if waving or maybe beckoning. He slowed, thinking she needed help. But when his headlights caught her face, her mouth was stretched in a grin too wide, too sharp, teeth bared in something far from human. He floored it, wagon rattling behind him, and didn't dare look in the rear view. Here's where it gets strange. Later that night, he found mud-streaked footprints on his porch, bare footprints, leading up to his door, but never away from it. Can you guys make it home safe with her following? Doubt it. Now let's slide in the impossible stories that only locals whisper after too many drinks. The first, a delivery driver said he hit her, straight on, red fabric, pale skin, the thump against the bumper. He felt it all. His heart dropped. He jumped out of the cab in panic, expecting to find her broken body on the asphalt. But the road was empty, and his truck, completely dry, no dent, no blood, no sign of impact at all, except for one thing. When he climbed back into the cab, the radio, dead for months, was playing a lullaby in a language he couldn't recognize. The second, a student driving back from a party claimed he saw her reflection in his rearview mirror not behind the car, but sitting in the back seat, her eyes fixed on his. He ditched the car halfway down the mountain and walked the rest of the way in the rain. When police found the abandoned vehicle, the inside of the windshield was smeared with muddy streaks, like someone had pressed their hands against the glass from the passenger side. And the third day, Hunter swore he saw her not on the road, but deep in the forest, standing among the trees, her red dress glowing like an ember in the downpour. The strange part, there was no rain in the forest that night, just silence. He blinked once, and she was gone. He blinked twice, and the ground around him was littered with wilted red petals that vanished when touched. Daniel didn't tell anyone his story at first, not his friends, not his co-workers. He didn't want to sound crazy, but every time the rain returned, so did his unease. Driving that road felt like playing a game he didn't understand, a game where the rules shifted with every downpour. Sometimes He swore he caught movement in the corner of his vision, the flutter of red fabric. Other times, he heard faint tapping against the glass, like raindrops that didn't belong. The strangest was when he got home one night, shut the car door, and realized his seatbelt was still wet with rainwater, though he hadn't rolled down the windows once. How do you survive when the road itself wants you to notice her? Maybe you don't. Maybe noticing is the trap. And so, the mountain's legend grew sharper, more defined. The woman in the red dress was no longer just a rumor. She was becoming a ritual. Rain plus road equals her. The question was no longer if you'd see her, 'twas when. Whispers on the road. Rain doesn't just fall on the mountain, it sings. That's what Daniel realized the next time he drove up there. The hiss of water on stone became a voice, not a single voice, but dozens, layered and overlapping, murmuring at the edge of hearing. He turned up the radio to drown it out, but the static seemed to blend with the whispers, almost like the storm was sinking itself to his car. And then it happened. The voice separated from the rest, clear as glass. Slow down. Daniel's foot pressed harder on the gas instead, because here's the rule you probably already guessed. If a mountain road tells you to slow down, the safest thing is to speed up. But the whispers followed. Some were chanting in languages he didn't know, some were childlike giggles, and just one sounded exactly like his own voice, repeating his name. Creepy event. Easy. As he reached the bend where he'd first seen her, the headlights flickered once, twice, then snapped off completely. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching, rain pounding against the windshield. For a moment, the world was pitch. No stars, no moon, no lights, just the sound of his heartbeat and the whispering. And in that thick darkness, the passenger side window lit up faintly. Not from inside the car, not from outside, just lit up, like someone invisible pressed their hand to the glass. A palm print formed slim fingers, long and delicate. He fumbled the headlights back on, and the road reappeared, empty, quiet. The palm print stayed on the glass, until the rain washed it away. Now, here's the weird detail. That night when he got home, Daniel found 3 red threads tangled around his rearview mirror. Not fabric scraps, not ribbon, actual woven threads, twisted and frayed, damp but not ruined by rain. He burned them, because what else do you do? But even as the smoke rose, the smell of wet earth lingered in his house for hours. Let's get into the impossible stories, because everyone has one, right? The first, a taxi driver taking passengers up the mountain, claimed he never saw the woman in red, but his passengers did. They screamed for him to stop, pointing wildly at the roadside. He swore there was nothing there. He kept driving until one of them begged to be let out. When he pulled over, they opened the door and immediately bolted back inside, slamming it shut. Because outside the car, in the rain, the woman stood not at the roadside, but directly beside the open door, smiling like she'd been waiting to climb in. The second, a mechanic recalled fixing a car that had stalled on the mountain. The owner said it just went dead when the rain started. But when the mechanic checked under the hood, he found something strange. The engine was dry, bone dry, like the storm hadn't touched it. But tucked inside the compartment, resting neatly on top of the battery, was a single wet footprint, child-sized dot. And the third, a pair of hikers swore they heard a woman singing in the storm. They followed the voice, thinking someone was lost. The sound led them to a clearing where an old shrine stood, crumbling and overgrown. There, in the center, was a soaked red garment draped across the stones. They backed away, but when they returned with friends the next day, the shrine was gone. Just mud, moss, and trees. Daniel's second run-in with the road wasn't as dramatic as those stories, but it carved deeper into him. He couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers weren't random. They weren't warnings or threats. They were questions, personal ones. He thought he heard them say things only he would know. Childhood secrets, a name he hadn't spoken in years. And maybe this is where the trap begins, right? Because the moment you think the voices are tailored to you, the moment you recognize them, that's when the mountain has you. Daniel sat parked at the roadside after the lights flickered back, hands shaking on the wheel. The storm raged, but inside the car, everything felt muted, like he was sealed in another world. He swore he heard one last whisper before the noise vanished. She's waiting. Now, I don't know about you, but if the storm ever tells me someone's waiting, I'll drive the other way, straight through the guardrail if I have to. But Daniel, he kept coming back, because here's the real curse of the woman in the red dress. It's not just that she appears when it rains. It's that once you see her, the mountain calls you back, again and again, until you understand why she waits. Can you survive a road that wants to remember you? The first visitor, Daniel, wasn't the only one curious enough, maybe unlucky enough, to return to the mountain road. By now, whispers of the woman in red had spread beyond campfire talk. Taxi drivers, delivery men, and even hikers whispered her story late at night, half daring each other to test the storm. And, as you might guess, there's always that one guy who hears the warnings and decides it's a fun idea to check it out. That guy was Marco. Marco was the kind of friend who didn't believe in ghosts unless they poured him a drink. He heard Daniel's story about the lights flickering, the palm print on the window, and the red threads on the mirror. His only response, "Cool, let's go see her." Yeah, if you've got a Marco in your life, hide his car keys. So one rainy Thursday, Marco drove up the same road with two friends crammed in the back seat. The storm didn't bother him. He was blasting music, windshield wipers struggling to keep up, headlights carving through the mist. At first, it was nothing, just rain, mud, and a steep drop waiting to swallow them. Then came the first weird thing. The car radio went dead, not just static dead, but the speakers didn't go quiet. Instead, a low hum filled the car, like a dozen monks chanting underwater. Marco laughed, claiming it was just interference. His friends, they weren't laughing. And then the creepy event hit. They rounded the bend near mile marker 13, and there she was, the woman in the red dress, standing at the shoulder of the road, drenched head to toe. Her long hair clung to her face, her dress heavy with water. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, rain running down her pale skin. Eyes locked on Marco's headlights. The backseat friends screamed, begging him to stop. But Marco did what Marco always did. He accelerated. "She's just some crazy hiker." He yelled over the storm that the woman didn't move. She didn't even flinch. Marco's car plowed forward, and the second the front bumper should have hit her, she was gone. Not gone like disappeared into the woods. Gone like she was never there. But here's the kicker. The car shuddered hard enough to feel like it had struck something. The hood crumpled inward, as though they'd collided head-on. They pulled over to check. Nothing on the road, nothing under the car. Just rain and fog. The hood, perfectly fine. Not a dent, but the backseat friends swore they still smelled roses inside the car. Sweet and heavy, even as the storm drowned everything else. Now for the weird detail. When they got home, Marco tossed his soaked jacket on the floor. Later that night, he found it hanging neatly on the back of his chair, dry, smelling faintly of roses. He lived alone. Here come the impossible stories again, 3 of them. Because the mountain likes variety. The first. A man claimed he picked up the woman herself during a storm. Said she climbed into the back seat without speaking, soaking wet, head bowed. He drove for miles, but when he glanced in the mirror, empty seat, only thing left, a puddle on the upholstery shaped exactly like 2 bare feet. The second, a young couple driving home after midnight, swore they saw a red figure ahead of them, but as they drew closer, they realized it wasn't one woman, it was 3, standing side by side, all identical, all staring blankly through the rain. When they blinked, only one remained, and even she was gone by the next turn. The third, a storm chaser, once followed the rain up the mountain with his camera. He snapped dozens of photos, hoping for lightning strikes. Later, reviewing them, he found a single frame where a red silhouette stood behind him, blurred in the flash. The issue? He was alone, and the camera had been pointing forward. Back to Marco. He didn't admit it that night, of course. He laughed it off, claimed his friends were exaggerating. But over the next week, he stopped sleeping well. Every time it rained, he heard something against his window, a faint tapping, like wet fingernails on glass. Daniel didn't have to ask. He already knew the mountain had chosen another visitor. And here's the dangerous part, my friends. It's not just seeing her that curses you, it's driving others to see her too. Because the more you share the road, the stronger the story grows. So, tell me this. If your best friend begged you to drive that road with them, in the storm, could you really say no? Or would you end up in the passenger seat, praying the woman in the red dress didn't decide to climb in beside you? The whisper in the rain. By the time the second storm rolled in, Daniel was ready, or at least he thought he was. He had boarded up his windows, set extra candles on the counter, and even stuffed a towel under the front door to keep the draft out. But no amount of preparation can stop what comes when the rain carries more than water. That night, the storm began like any other. Wind shaking the roof tiles, gutters overflowing, thunder grumbling in the distance. But sometime after midnight, the sound of the rain changed. It wasn't falling straight anymore, it was whispering. At first, Daniel thought he was half asleep, maybe dreaming, but the whispers grew clearer, threading through the downpour like voices pressed against thin walls. Words he couldn't quite make out, though one phrase repeated, soft but insistent. She's waiting. She's waiting. Creepy, right? Try hearing it in the rhythm of the rain while your house rattles like it's about to come apart. The creepy event struck around 2 a.m. Daniel blew out his candles, thinking maybe it was the wind making shapes of sound. He sat in the dark, listening, and then 3 sharp knocks at the front door. Not thunder, not branches, knocks. He froze. No one in their right mind would be out in weather like that. But the knocking came again, slow and deliberate this time, followed by the scrape of something across the door. He whispered a prayer under his breath, but when he finally worked up the courage to peek through the peephole, he didn't see a person. He didn't even see a shadow. He saw wet footprints leading away from the porch, stopping halfway down the muddy path, as though the visitor had simply vanished into the storm. Now for the weird, unrelated detail. Daniel's clock, the old wall clock above his kitchen table, had stopped, but not at midnight like the cliché says. It had stopped at 1:13, the exact number of the room where the woman had died. According to an old rumor Daniel had dug up, the hands stayed frozen, no matter how many times he rewound it. And you know what's coming? 3 impossible stories, shared by others who had met the whispering rain. The first came from a hiker who claimed that during a storm, he heard his dead mother's voice in the rainfall, calling him by name. When he turned around, he saw her outline traced in silver drops, smiling faintly before dissolving back into mist. The second was from a truck driver who pulled over during a heavy downpour. He swore the rain on his windshield began spelling words, his own name letter by letter, in clear streaks across the glass. The third, a family swore that one night, rain began to fall inside their living room, soaking the carpet and furniture, while outside the skies were clear and silent. The only trace left behind, the faint scent of roses hanging in the air. Back in Daniel's home, the storm pressed on. He couldn't bring himself to sleep, not with the whispers humming through the rain. He tried music, tried plugging his ears, even tried reading an old book by candlelight. Nothing worked. The whispers cut through everything by dawn. When the storm finally broke, Daniel stumbled outside to check the road, and there it was, mile marker 13, glistening in the early light, and next to it a fresh bouquet of roses, bright red, untouched by the rain. He hadn't put them there, and that's when he realized something terrifying. She wasn't just appearing to drivers on the road anymore. She was reaching into their homes, into their nights, into their whispers. So tell me if you heard a voice outside your window tonight, blending with the rain, whispering your name. Would you open the curtains, or would you just pull the blanket tighter, hoping she hasn't chosen you yet? The candle that wouldn't die. Daniel didn't dare throw the roses away. Something in his gut told him they weren't just flowers, they were a sign, a marker that she was near. So he left them on the porch, untouched, and tried to go about his day. But by evening, a new strangeness began. He lit one of his last candles at sundown, the only thing that gave him comfort in the dark. But the flame burned oddly too tall, too steady, like it was breathing in sync with something else in the room. He tried blowing it out once, just once, and the flame bent, flickered but refused to die. Not once, not twice. He even pinched it with wet fingers. The flame stung him but lived on, as if mocking him. That night, the candle seemed brighter than ever, its glow shifting shadows across the walls. And among those shadows, Daniel swore he saw the silhouette of a woman in a torn gown, standing in the corner of his kitchen, not moving, just watching. The night's most terrifying moment happened at 3:13 a.m. Daniel had dozed off in his chair, exhaustion pulling him under, when the smell hit him. Roses stronger than ever, flooding the room like perfume spilled across the floor. He woke with a start. The candle burned taller, brighter, then flared suddenly, casting the whole room in gold light. In that instant, he saw her clearly, a pale face, hollow eyes, lips parted in a whisper he couldn't hear. She stood not in the corner now, but right behind his chair. Daniel leaped up, knocking the chair over. The candle toppled, 2 wax spilling, wick bent, yet the flame still burned, steady as ever, and in its glow, she was gone. The strangest part, the next morning, the wax had hardened into a shape on the table. Not random, not melted chaos. It was the number 13, perfectly formed, as though someone had carved it there with deliberate care. Daniel didn't touch it. He's COULDN, single quotes T. And now the 3 stories from others who swore the same impossible flame haunted them. The first, a maid in an old manor, claimed that a single candle in the chapel burned for 7 years straight. No matter how many times she doused it, they buried it with the family matriarch after she died, and weeks later, the grave was glowing faintly from beneath the soil. The second, a sailor told of a lantern on his ship that never went out, even after waves washed over it. One night, when it finally did extinguish, the ship vanished into fog and was never seen again. The third, a widow swore her late husband's candle at the altar relit itself every night, long after she had blown it out. One morning, she awoke to find the melted wax pooled into the shape of a hand reaching toward her side of the bed. Back in Daniel's kitchen, the wax 13 stayed fixed, impossible to scrape away. The flame, too, returned each night without him lighting it. By the 4th night, Daniel stopped trying to fight it. He sat by the glow, trembling, waiting for her to appear again, and sure enough, just before dawn, he heard her whisper at Lassoff, clear, undeniable, "You're mine." The candle flickered once, twice, then went out on its own, and Daniel knew what that meant. The waiting was over. Rain on the mountain road. Daniel avoided the mountain road for as long as he could, but life doesn't always bend around fear. Work forced him up there one stormy night, and of course, the sky broke open just as his car climbed the first bend. The wipers struggled. Rain smacked the windshield like handfuls of nails. The road was slick, the guardrails rusted, the trees bending in the storm's wind like skeletal arms. And then there she was, the woman in red. She stood at the curve ahead, soaked yet untouched by the storm. Her gown clung to her frame, hair plastered against her face. She didn't move, didn't wave. She simply watched the headlights grow closer. Daniel slammed the brakes, heart leaping into his throat. The tires skidded, water spraying, the car fishtailing dangerously close to the edge. But when he stopped, when he dared to look, she wasn't there. The road was empty. Only the echo of her shape lingered in his mind. But the worst part wasn't her vanishing. It was what came after. He checked the rearview mirror, and there she was again. Not on the road now, no. She was inside the car, sitting in the back seat. Her soaked dress dripped onto the leather. Her face leaned toward his ear, but her mouth never moved. Only her eyes, wide, black, bottomless, met his in the mirror. Daniel bolted forward, speeding through curves that would have killed him if luck hadn't gripped the wheel. When he finally reached the next town, he dared to look again. The back seat was dry, empty, not a trace, but the scent of roses lingered still. And others. They had stories too. 3 impossible ones, just as chilling. The first, a farmer swore he'd picked up a woman in red during a downpour, gave her his coat, and dropped her at the old inn. But when he went back the next morning to collect his coat, the innkeeper told him no one had stayed there for 50 years. His coat was found draped over a gravestone instead. The second, a traveling merchant once claimed the woman appeared in his cart during a thunderstorm, silent, smiling faintly. She vanished halfway through the journey. But when he reached the next village, his goods were ruined, every sack of grain filled with mud and water. The third, a priest confessed, years later, that he had given a ride to a pale woman in a crimson dress. She asked to be dropped at the cemetery. When he obliged, she slipped out of the car, but left behind a rosary soaked in rain. That rosary never dried, no matter how many times it was left in the sun. Daniel didn't sleep that night. How could he? He sat in the dark. The memory of her face in his mirror burned into his skull. Every sound outside every car, every crack of thunder, every drip of water felt like her coming back for him. And the strangest detail of all, in the morning, his car door was wet, only one of them, the back right, as if someone had opened it in the storm and stepped inside. The roses were back to, not on the porch this time, on his driver's seat. So I'll ask you, if you were on that road, with the storm blinding your eyes and a woman in red staring you down, could you survive that ride? Whispers in the rain. The town had its own way of dealing with her story. People didn't call her ghost outright. They called her the storm's bride, as if she wasn't just a haunting, but a piece of the rain itself. Daniel tried to laugh it off when locals shared their versions. Over coffee at the diner, he listened to 2 old truckers debate who she really was. One said she was the spirit of a woman left at the altar. The other swore she was a mother searching for her child lost in a landslide. Doesn't matter which, one muttered, sipping his black coffee. What matters is, if she looks at you, you won't get home the same. Daniel didn't admit he'd already seen her eyes in the rearview mirror. That night, he dreamt of rain. He was back on the mountain road, his car moving slowly, the windshield fogging. Only this time, he wasn't alone. She was in the passenger seat. Her red dress gleamed in flashes of lightning. Drops of water rolled down her pale arms, but her hair was dry. She didn't speak. She only hummed a soft tune, like a lullaby sung through teeth. And then the tune changed. The hum became whispers, layered on top of each other. Too many voices to belong to one woman. They crowded the car, filling it with sound, until Daniel jerked awake. But even in his waking room, the sound hadn't left. The whispers dripped from the corners, from the rain gutter outside, from the pipes beneath the floor. He covered his ears. Still, they pressed in. The town was filled with impossible tales like this. The first, a boy claimed he saw her reflected in a puddle, when no one else was there. When he reached down to touch the water, his hand came back stained red, as though dipped in paint. The color wouldn't wash off until the next storm. The second, a hunter trudging down the road at night, swore he passed the woman 3 separate times. Each time she looked, the same head bowed, red dress trailing behind. But when he glanced back after the third encounter, all 3 stood together, side by side, watching him. The third, an old widow, confessed she once invited the woman inside during a storm. The figure accepted, sat by the fire, and never spoke. When dawn came, the chair was empty, but the wood beneath it had rotted overnight, crumbling to dust. Daniel told himself none of it was real. Ghost stories, small-town legends, nothing more. But denial is weak armor, especially when he began to notice her patterns. The roses always appeared the same way, fresh, wet, carrying a perfume too strong for natural flowers, always in pairs, always placed where he would find them without looking too hard. One evening, he found them balanced on his steering wheel. The next, tucked into his shoes by the door. Once, God help him, he found them inside his refrigerator, pressed between the shelves. The weirdest part, he hated roses his whole life, allergic to them, yet not once did he sneeze when hers appeared, as if they weren't roses at all. The whispers in the rain came back on the 4th night, louder this time. They filled his ears, threaded through his dreams, spun into words he almost recognized. Almost, but not quite. He stayed awake until dawn, staring at his window, and for one brief second, just as the storm ended, he saw her face pressed against the glass, upside down, her black eyes locked on his. And then the glass cracked. So tell me, when your window fills with rain, when your reflection isn't you anymore, but something else staring back, could you survive that night? The road that remembers, the mountain road, twisted through the fog like a snake, coiling itself tighter with each curve. Daniel had driven it many times by now, but every storm made it feel like a stranger. The trees leaned closer, the mist clung longer, and the pavement seemed to stretch in directions it hadn't the night before. He wasn't alone in thinking that. One mechanic at the gas station had warned him, wiping oil off his hands with a rag that looked older than the shop itself. That road remembers, kid. Every car that crashes there, every person who disappears, it soaks it up. And when it rains, it shows you what it's holding. Daniel didn't ask how he knew. He was already too far in. On the 9th night, thunder shook the hills. Daniel felt the pull, like something had wound an invisible string round his chest and was dragging him back to the road. He didn't fight it. He drove. Halfway up the incline, the storm thickened. Rain smeared across the windshield until the wipers gave up. And that's when he saw them shapes in the water, flickering like reflections on glass. Cars. Dozens of them. Some looked rusted, half destroyed, with vines wrapping their wheels. Others gleamed new, headlights blazing, but none were real. They passed through each other like shadows, through his car, to Dot, and in every one of those phantom cars, there was a driver, slumped, pale, faces lit by lightning. Some familiar from news clippings he'd seen framed on the diner wall. Accidents dating back decades, others strangers, all together. All of them staring forward, silent. It wasn't just the cars. The road itself shifted beneath him. The asphalt glistened, but not from rain. Its surface seemed to ripple, like tar bubbling on a stove. His tires sank an inch, then pulled free with a groan, and through those ripples, he swore he saw something beneath. Hands, dozens of them, pale, clawing upward, One brushed the undercarriage of his car. He felt the shudder vibrate through his bones. He drove faster, but the road bent differently than it should have. He wasn't sure if he was climbing the mountain anymore or circling endlessly. The impossible tales spread wider in this section of town. The first, a cyclist swore he rode the road one bright morning and found himself surrounded by rain, though the sky was clear. When he stopped, the rain vanished, but his bike chain was dripping wet. The second, a couple reported the road stretched longer than it should have. A 10-minute drive became an hour, though their car's clock had ticked only 3 minutes forward. The third, a priest claimed he saw the woman in the red dress, standing at every bend. He blessed the road with holy water afterward, but days later, someone scrawled words across his chapel door in muddy handprints. "She was here before you." Daniel tried not to join their ranks, but when he pulled into a turn and braked, there she was, standing at the edge. The red dress clung to her in the rain, water streaking down her arms like veins of silver. She didn't look at him this time. Instead, she bent slowly, placing something on the ground. 2 roses. They stayed upright, despite the downpour. Lightning flashed, and for the briefest second, Daniel saw not one woman but many layered, like a deck of cards shuffled wrong. Different faces, all in the same red dress, some weeping, some blank, some with mouths wide open in screams he could not hear. Then, as quickly as they appeared, they folded back into one. She turned her head. Her eyes caught his dot, and the roses on the ground began to bleed. The road behind him was gone. The road ahead looked endless, and Daniel wondered if this mountain wanted him. How many storms could he really survive? The storms whispered. The storm that night had a voice. Not thunder, not wind, but something softer, like whispers stretched too thin across the air. Daniel cracked his window once, and the sound slipped in. Words he almost understood. Syllables that stuck in the back of his mind like burrs. They weren't human, or maybe they were, but drowned, distorted, stretched by centuries. He tried turning the radio on. Static answered him, but the strange thing was within the static. He heard a rhythm, a woman humming, like she was working a loom or cooking by a fire. The tune rolled under the hiss of interference, patient, old, unbothered by the storm outside. Daniel clicked it off. The humming didn't stop. He passed the first milestone marker, chipped stone with Roman numerals that didn't belong on any modern road. 17. The second followed soon after. 19. He leaned closer to the glass, wiping fog with the back of his sleeve. The markers weren't just numbers. They had names scratched beneath them, names he recognized from newspaper clippings. Every accident victim from the mountain road. At the next turn, he slowed. There she was again, the woman in the red dress, not standing, walking. Her feet never touched the ground. Each step seemed to float an inch above the wet asphalt, leaving no mark in the puddles. The dress swayed as if in a breeze, though the rain pounded heavy dot, and this time, she whispered, not to him, not directly, but to the road. Her lips moved, and the cracks in the pavement widened. Roots pushed through like veins. The headlights caught faces in those roots, faint, twisted, gone in a blink, but Daniel's mind clung to them. The impossible stories fit together here. The first, a bus driver once claimed every passenger disappeared mid-ride on the mountain. He found himself alone, seats wet, echoes of voices lingering like fog. The second, a boy swore he saw a farmhouse appear by the roadside during a storm. Windows glowed golden. Smoke curled from the chimney. When he blinked, it was gone, but his shoes were muddy from stepping into a yard that didn't exist. The third, 2 hikers followed what they thought was a detour path. They returned 3 days later, their watches frozen at the same minute. When asked where they went, they answered in unison, "We walked where she walked." Daniel gripped the wheel. He could feel his own heartbeat sync with the rain's rhythm, and somewhere in that rhythm, the whispers grew louder. They weren't coming from outside. They were inside the car. The rearview mirror showed condensation on the backseat window, though he hadn't seen anyone there. A word traced itself slowly in the fog. Stay. He hit the gas. Tires squealed. Water sprayed. The car fishtailed before catching grip again. He didn't dare look back, though he knew if he did, he'd see her sitting there, dress spilling across the seat like blood in water. He didn't need to check the mirror to know. The whisper was smiling. The storm's voice climbed, wrapping around his ears like cold hands. The words weren't fully clear, but one line sank through, repeating over and over like a chant. Every road leads to her. Daniel tightened his grip. His knuckles turned, bone white. But what terrified him most wasn't the chant. It was the truth that gnawed its way into his thoughts. What if this storm wasn't just weather? What if the storm itself was her? Ahead, the fog parted briefly. A figure flickered into view at the bend. Not just one, many, dozens, all in red dresses, all standing at once, and every single one whispering the storm's song. Can you guys get out of this? Or are you just going to let the storm sing you to sleep? The village that wasn't there, Daniel thought the storm was guiding him into madness, till the road opened wider, and he saw something impossible through the downpour. A village. Lanterns swung on crooked wooden posts, smoke curled from chimneys, and narrow cobblestone lanes glistened in the rain. The buildings leaned too close together, timber and plaster patched with moss. It looked alive, thriving even, but his gut screamed otherwise. This wasn't on any map. He'd driven this route before. There was no village. He slowed, headlights sweeping across the crooked sign at the entrance. The letters were faint, nearly erased by time, but he caught a single word: welcome. The storm softened as soon as his tires touched the cobblestones. No rain, no thunder, just silence that it was like stepping through a curtain. And in that silence, he heard a soft creak, a window shutter opening. An old woman peered out, face pale, eyes wide, hair hanging in wet ropes. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She lifted her arms slowly and pointed not at him, not at the car, but behind him. Daniel refused to look. He parked the car on the edge of the square. Lanterns flickered, though no one tended them. Stalls stood empty, baskets half filled with rotting apples, cloth strips dangling in the windless air. Then the church bell rang. That wasn't a clear toll, it groaned, like metal bent too far. The sound scraped across the stones, made the air vibrate, and the villagers appeared, not from doors, not from alleys. They stepped out of the shadows, one by one, wearing red dresses, cloaks, scarves all, shades of crimson, all soaked, though no rain touched them. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths silent, but every footstep echoed louder than the bell. The impossible stories found roots here. The first, an old trucker once swore he stopped for gas at a village exactly like this, paid with cash, spoke with the attendant, even bought bread. The next day, police told him the town had burned down 100 years ago. The second, a woman hiking the road said she found herself in a festival. Music, dancers, masks of gold and black. She joined them for hours, laughing, eating, but when she blinked, she was standing alone in a field of graves, her mouth full of dirt. The third, a soldier during the war, claimed he marched through a ghost village on this mountain. His whole unit disappeared one by one until he was alone. When he returned to camp, only 3 hours had passed, though his boots were worn as if he'd walked for weeks. Daniel moved toward the church, drawn by the tolling. The doors stood ajar. Light pulsed from within, not candlelight, not fire, but a glow like lightning trapped inside glass. Inside, the pews were filled. Rows of villagers sat rigid, their faces blank, hands folded. At the altar stood the woman in the red dress. Her hair dripped with rain that didn't fall here. Her eyes burned faint gold. She raised her hands, and every villager's head turned at once, toward Daniel. Their mouths opened, and the silence broke. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't words. It was the sound of drowning. The echo of lungs filled with water, of last gasps clawing for air. It poured from every throat, echoing off stone walls, vibrating through the floorboards. Daniel stumbled, covering his ears, but it pressed in anyway. A flood of sound that wasn't meant for human ears. He staggered back, bumping into a pew. The wood was wet, not with rain, but blood. His hands came away slick. He ran out the church, across the square, toward the car. But when he reached it, the windshield reflected something wrong. Not his own face, not the road. The reflection showed the church still behind him. But the villagers were closer now, surrounding him. Their hands reached slowly, palms outstretched, fingers dripping. One word spilled from their mouths at last, all together, all in the same voice: stay. The storm returned in a single crash, ripping the illusion apart. The village blinked out like a lantern extinguished. Daniel found himself back on the mountain road, alone, rain hammering his car roof. No church, no villagers, but the back seat smelled of wet earth and rotting apples. Can you guys get out of this? Or is the village waiting for you to blink? The face in the mirror. Daniel gripped the steering wheel like it was the only real thing left. The storm had swallowed the road again, lightning slicing the mountainside in jagged lines. His mind spun with what he had seen: the villagers in red, the drowned chorus, the woman at the altar. But the village was gone now. Had it ever been there? He wiped condensation from the inside of the windshield. For a split second, he caught sight of his reflection. Only, it wasn't his Dot. The face in the glass was pale, lips blue, water dripping from hollow sockets where eyes should have been. It stared at him, its mouth opening in silence before whispering something he felt more than heard. "You're already inside." He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and the reflection was gone. Just himself, shaken, wet, terrified, but himself. Still, he couldn't shake the cold weight of that phrase clinging to his skin. Already inside. What? The road stretched ahead, black ribbon cut by white lightning. He pushed the car faster, desperate to leave the mountain behind. The radio flickered back on static at first. Then a voice, not music, not news, a voice that sounded like his own. It spoke in rhythm, like someone reading from a diary. Dates, times, details: Daniel's life, written out loud. Where he was born, what he ate last week, the exact way he looked in the mirror that morning. Then, without warning, it shifted to things he hadn't done yet. It described him driving right now, through the storm. It described the reflection he had just seen. And then it described him stopping the car at the next curve. He swore aloud, shaking his head. But when he reached the curve, his hands moved without his permission. His foot pressed the brake. The car slowed, rolled to the shoulder, and stopped. The voice on the radio went quiet, and in the silence, he heard tapping from the passenger side mirror. The glass fogged, as if someone breathed against it. A shape pressed outward, first a hand, then a face. His own, again. But this time, the reflection smiled. Daniel slammed the gear shift tires, skidding on wet asphalt. But the mirror image didn't disappear. It rode alongside him, grinning wider eyes, sinking deeper into black pits. At one point, it turned its head as though listening to something Daniel couldn't hear. Then it mouthed a single word. Turn. The impossible stories returned to his mind, like flashing warnings. The first woman swore her bathroom mirror began showing her walking in a forest she had never visited. She ignored it until the day her body was found in that exact forest, miles from her home. The second, a miner in the mountains, smashed a mirror after seeing his reflection whispering to him. He laughed it off until he noticed shards of glass appearing in his bed each night, cutting him in his sleep. The third, a girl in the city, said her reflection wouldn't blink when she did. One day, it reached out, touched the glass, and her parents found her inside the mirror, trapped, screaming silently from the other side. Daniel floored the accelerator. The car roared through rain and thunder, but the reflection didn't leave. He tried not to look, but the temptation was magnetic. His double's face pressed harder against the mirror, skin splitting, teeth bared. When lightning lit the mountain, he caught another detail in the corner of his eye. The reflection wasn't alone. Behind his double, shadowy figures crowded the glass, their faces blurred, their mouths gaping like open wounds. Hands clawed the inside of the mirror, as though it were a window keeping them from spilling out. He finally snapped, punching the mirror with his fist. Glass shattered, pain shooting through his knuckles. Pieces rained across the wet road. The reflection vanished. For a few seconds, there was only storm again. But then his rearview mirror flickered. Every shard of glass in his car, scattered across the seats and floor, began to glow faintly gold. Each one reflected not his face but that same drowned, hollow-eyed version. And all of them whispered at once, voices layered and overlapping, as if the mountain itself spoke through them. Already inside, Daniel screamed, covering the shards with his jacket, forcing himself not to look. He drove blind, storm pounding the roof, eyes fixed on the road ahead. But in the next flash of lightning, he realized something worse. The storm no longer reflected on his windshield. Instead, the glass showed a still, dark room behind him. Rows of broken mirrors lined the walls, and in each one, dozens of versions of himself stood, watching, waiting. Can you guys get out of this? Or are you already inside too? The road that loops back. Daniel's knuckles bled into the steering wheel, the sting sharp and real, but everything else felt like sliding into a fever dream. The storm hammered harder, thunder so close it rattled the frame of the car. He pressed on the gas, refusing to look at any reflective surface again. The road bent left, then right, and then left again. Familiar, too familiar. He passed the crooked pine tree leaning over the guardrail. He'd seen it already. He knew he had. He told himself maybe it was another tree, another bend, but then the gas station appeared on the horizon. The one he had passed 3 hours ago. Daniel slammed the brakes. Tires screeched, the smell of burning rubber filling the cabin. He sat there, panting, staring at the glowing sign through the rain. It was impossible, but there it was. The same old, empty gas station. The radio crackled to life again. Static hissed, then cleared. A woman's voice spoke this time, calm even. You shouldn't have broken it. Now you're bleeding into the loop. His heart froze. He tried the dial, twisting it wildly. The voice stayed, steady, almost soothing. You'll keep driving. You'll keep circling until the storm ends. But it won't end, because you already ended. His vision blurred, the edges of the world bending like wet paper. He wiped his eyes and realized his reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't moving. Daniel's chest rose and fell, with panicked breaths, but in the mirror, he sat still, perfectly still. Then, slowly, the reflection smiled. It raised a hand, pressed one finger to its lips, and whispered through cracked, waterlogged teeth, "Don't tell him yet." Daniel grabbed his jacket, threw it over the mirror, and floored the gas pedal again. The storm swallowed the world outside, rain streaking sideways, thunder booming above. But after 20 minutes, his headlights illuminated the same crooked pine, the same guardrail, and the same gas station. Sign flickering in the distance. He screamed, pounding the steering wheel. No, it's not stuck here. His voice cracked. He slammed the horn until it blared into the storm. That's when the impossible stories returned, weaving themselves tighter around his throat. The first, a sailor claimed his ship circled the same island for 3 days. No matter which way he sailed, he jumped overboard indesperately for his crew to watch him climb back onto the ship from the other side, drenched but smiling strangely. The second, a boy in the city, dreamed every night that he walked the same alley, turned the same corner, only to wake and find himself still dreaming. He stopped eating, stopped speaking, and one morning his parents found his body still breathing, but his eyes fixed, trapped in some endless loop. The third, a hunter, once followed deer tracks in the snow, walking for hours until he reached his own cabin again. Inside, he found himself already sitting by the fire, smiling, waiting for him to arrive. That the gas station grew closer again. Daniel slowed this time, unwilling to pass it. Maybe there was someone there. Maybe he could wake up. The sign buzzed, sputtering light across the soaked asphalt. The windows were black, but a faint glow pulsed inside, like a lantern swaying. He parked, engine idling, and stepped out into the storm. Rain drenched him instantly, cold and sharp. His shoes slapped against the flooded pavement as he approached the door. Through the glass, he saw shelves, an old counter, a mirror hanging behind it, and in that mirror himself, already inside. His reflection waved, and then, one by one, the mirrors lining the shelves lit up, each holding a different Daniel, some older, some younger, some broken and bleeding, others calm and waiting. The one behind the counter leaned forward and whispered, fogging the glass, "The road doesn't end, it only circles. You broke it when you looked too close." Daniel staggered backward, heart pounding, as every reflection smiled in unison. Their mouths moved silently at first, then, like a choir, they spoke through the thunder. Already inside, already inside, already inside. He ran back to the car, back to the wheel, back into the storm, but deep down, he knew he wasn't escaping. He wasn't even moving. The road only led back to itself, and he was no longer the one driving. Would you keep driving? Or would you stop at the station and see which version of yourself is waiting inside? The woman in the passenger seat. The storm shrieked louder than his thoughts, but Daniel still heard the door click. He didn't open it, he didn't reach for the handle, but someone had entered the car. The air shifted, heavy, damp with the scent of wet earth and roses left too long in the rain. Slowly, afraid of his own neck turning, he glanced at the passenger seat. She was there, the woman in the red dress. Her soaked gown clung to her pale frame, water dripping onto the seat, pooling at her bare feet. Her hair was slicked against her face, but her eyes, those black, bottomless eyes, glowed faintly in the storm's light. "Drive," she said softly, though her lips barely moved. Daniel's throat closed. He pressed the pedal, and the car lurched forward. The crooked pine blurred past, the guardrail swallowed again by shadows, the gas station fading behind them. But the woman didn't look outside. She kept her gaze fixed on him, her smile faint, patient. "You don't understand yet," she whispered, rain dripping down her collarbone. "This road isn't yours, it's mine." He gripped the wheel so tightly his nails dug crescent moons into the leather. "What do you want from me?" he shouted over the storm. She tilted her head. "You kept looking back when you should have just kept going. That's why you're here. That's why you're mine." A chill seeped into his bones. Then came the first impossible story of the night. There was a tale of a woman who flagged down travelers on mountain roads during storms, always dressed in red. Some who stopped to help her were never seen again. Others claimed she climbed into their vehicles, only to vanish halfway down the path. Yet weeks later, their families received letters written in their handwriting, all signed, "She's still with me." Daniel slammed the brakes. The car skidded, fishtailing in the rain, but the woman didn't move. Her hands remained folded neatly on her lap, her smile unbroken. He turned to her. "Get out." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't make me. You let me in when you broke the mirror." His breath caught. He had covered the mirror, but he had looked too long before, and she had stepped through. The second impossible story. Pressed in, an old villager told of a carriage that rode through storms without horses, a red-clad passenger always inside. The carriage never stopped, circling the same road for centuries. When travelers swore they saw it, the next day one of their own would vanish, only for their voice to be heard laughing on the wind whenever the carriage passed again. Daniel shoved the car into reverse, tires screaming against the wet pavement, the headlights flared against the dark, and for one hopeful second, he thought maybe he could backtrack, force the loop to brake. But as the beams cut through the storm, they revealed another car behind them, his car. The same dent on the fender, the same cracked license plate. Inside it sat himself slack-jawed, UNMOVING. And beside that reflection of himself, another woman in red. Daniel's stomach twisted. He slammed the gear back into drive, desperate to outrun the vision. But the woman beside him leaned closer, her breath cold against his ear. "You can't outrun what's already inside." Her hand touched his, fingers icy, nails sharp. She guided the wheel without force, yet he couldn't resist. The road curved, bending in ways it shouldn't. He blinked, and suddenly they weren't on asphalt anymore. The car floated over cobblestones, slick with rain, lanterns flickering along the roadside. The night far too quiet. The third impossible story wrapped itself around him. A young man once claimed his family carriage transformed on a stormy ride, carrying him not forward, but sideways into a world where every road curved back to the same gate. He swore the passenger beside him was his late wife, red-dressed and smiling. No one believed him, until weeks later the same carriage returned without horses. The man gone, the woman waiting silently inside. The windshield blurred. The rain wasn't rain anymore. Wit was red, streaking like blood across the glass. The wipers smeared it worse. Daniel shouted, clawing at the controls, but the woman leaned forward, her face inches from his. Her eyes burned like twin candles drowned in wax. "You asked what I wanted," she whispered. "I want you to stop fighting. Just stay." The car rattled, the road dissolving beneath them, and Daniel realized he wasn't sure if he was moving at all. Maybe he never had been, and maybe she had always been there. The storm swallowed his scream as the loop pulled tighter, the woman's laughter threading with the thunder. Would you keep driving with her beside you, or open the door and step out into the storm, not knowing what waits beyond the loop? The loop never ends. The road curved again, endlessly. The storm no longer sounded like rain, it was like whispers pressed against the glass, voices overlapping, layered with laughter and grief. Daniel's knuckles were bone white against the steering wheel, but the woman in red sat calmly beside him, as though the storm existed only for him. Her reflection no longer matched her form. In the windshield's sheen, she appeared skeletal, her eye sockets hollow, her red dress hanging like a funeral shroud. Yet when Daniel turned his head, she was as radiant as ever, her lips still curled in that patient smile. "You've been here longer than you realize," she murmured, stroking the cracked dashboard with pale fingers. "Every scream, every break, every attempt, you've done them all before. This is your road now." Daniel tried to answer, but his voice caught in his throat. Instead, another sound escaped like laughter, but it wasn't his. The first impossible story crept in. Travelers once swore of a man who returned home after a stormy night on the mountain. He looked like himself, walked like himself, even carried the same umbrella he had left with. But his family said his eyes were hollow, like someone had scraped out the light. A week later, he vanished at dinner chair, pushed back, food still steaming, rain dripping on the floor. No one could explain how the storm had followed him inside. The loop tightened. Daniel's headlights flickered, revealing the crooked pine, the guardrail, the gas station sign still swaying though the wind had died. He slammed the brakes, forcing the car to a halt, tires squealing. The woman tilted her head. "Stopping won't save you. Stopping just makes it easier for me to stay." He turned, sharply, desperate. "Why me?" Her smile widened. "Why not?" The second impossible story whispered. A monk once wrote of meeting a red-dressed figure on a mountain pass. She offered him a seat beneath her crimson umbrella, though it wasn't raining. When he refused, she laughed, saying he would never escape the storm without her. The monk later vanished, his last journal page stained with water. Though no rain had fallen that night, Daniel's breath grew shallow. He flung the car door open, stepping out into the storm. The ground sucked at his shoes, mud churning beneath him. But when he glanced back, the car was gone. The woman stood behind him now, her dress glowing in the lightning, her eyes brighter than fireflies trapped in glass. "You left the door open," she said. "Now I can follow." His heart hammered. He sprinted toward the trees, branches slapping his arms, rain burning against his face. The mountain path twisted but never changed, each turn leading him back to the road, and always she was there. The third impossible story folded in. A farmer swore he saw a woman in red, dancing in the rain on a hillside. He claimed the ground beneath her feet never grew wet, the puddles parting as she twirled. He told this story every night at the tavern, until one day, people noticed he no longer came to drink. His farm lay empty, animals unfed, doors wide open. Yet sometimes, in storms, the neighbors said they could still hear music from the hillside, soft and distant. Daniel staggered to his knees, soaked to the bone, his strength breaking. The woman crouched beside him, tilting her head like a curious crow. "It's easier if you don't resist. That's how they all learn." Her hand rested on his shoulder, cold, heavy. Final dot, and then just as lightning split the sky, he saw them. Dozens of shapes behind her, men and women in dripping red garments, their faces blurred by shadow, their mouths open in silent screams. Each one moved with her, like echoes. Daniel tried to scream too, but his voice drowned in thunder. The storm devoured the night, and the mountain road waited for its next traveler. But for now, you don't need to keep driving in that storm. You don't need to picture that endless loop of rain, headlights, and red dresses following you through the dark. You can let it go, breathe, feel the weight of your blanket, the safety of your room, the simple calm of being here instead of there. The road will still twist and turn somewhere far away, but you're not on it. Not tonight. Instead, imagine a soft drizzle against your window, not a storm, just a gentle rain that soothes instead of frightens. Imagine the sound of it blending with the hum of your fan. The rhythm steady. Calm, almost like a lullaby. Outside, the world can be wild, but in here, you're safe, wrapped in your own quiet space. Close your eyes, see a lantern glowing warmly in the dark, steady and soft, guiding you back home. No red dress, no endless road, just the comfort of knowing that, when the night is long, you can rest, and the morning will always come. And with that image, let the storm fade from your mind. Let yourself drift into something gentler, something lighter, something calm. Good night, sleep well.